Thank you to Asset Management BC for this opportunity to provide. I'm going to provide a brief overview of the program and share with you some of the results from the first two cohorts. We had 14 local governments go through the program, and we have some interesting results we're looking forward to sharing with you. Firstly, a good place to always start is, what are the objectives of this Operationalizing Asset Management program? What are we trying to achieve? Well, these objectives fall into two categories. Outcomes for the participants themselves, the individuals from the local governments, and also the outcomes for the program as a whole. From the perspective of the individual participants, one outcome is peer learning, sharing with one another best practices around operationalizing asset management and learning from one another. Using the 4Cs approach discussed by David Allen, applying that to operationalizing asset management, and ultimately the program culminates in a business case, which each of the cohort participants can take back to their organization to help improve resourcing of whatever kind relative to their asset management journey. And this business case really is about helping to communicate what are the challenges around operationalizing asset management. Why has the organization been challenged with operationalizing? And for those who want to continue in the program, there's also the opportunity to work with Asset Management BC to write case studies. Some have been recently showcased in the newsletter, and we're looking for additional case studies over time so that we can all continue to share with the community of practice across the province. A little bit about the program architecture. We start off by looking at what is the current state of the organization. We have barriers. We want to uncover these barriers. We want to understand what is the root cause of these barriers. And we want to understand, how do we move towards sustainable service delivery? This is the desired future state. The transition state that links the current state to that desired future state. The cohort and the program apply the 4Cs in a cohort setting to uncover and dismantle these barriers and get us on our program, our journey of continuous improvement to sustainable service delivery. Now, cultural change is hard, but it does pay dividends over the long run, and it's not a linear journey. As Jason Kinch pointed out earlier on, there is sometimes this feeling of taking 2 steps backwards in order to go 1 step forward, and we have to persevere as a local government to get us through that initial phase. So change is difficult. To move from our as-is state to our to-be state takes effort and takes time. Now, we have applied in the program a structured approach to uncovering barriers and dismantling barriers. Thought I'd now give you some feedback on what came out of the first cohort. When we asked the first cohort, what do they think of when they think of operationalizing asset management? Well, here is a word cloud. To them, it was about efficiency, about budget, about process, and many other things. For the second cohort, it was about implementation, putting things into action, about planning, etc. Now, we also asked the 2 cohorts at the beginning of the program, how well are they currently operationalizing asset management? Well, these are the results from the first cohort. Generally felt that they were doing a fair job at it, but lots of room for improvement. And here are the results from the second cohort, a more wider distribution, and with an average being of the 2 cohorts somewhere doing a fair job. Now, we are looking to have local governments who have some good practices, who are doing operationalizing in a good way, so they can share those results with others, so we can learn from each other in a cohort setting. We asked the cohorts, what are your biggest challenges, ranked in order? And here is the results from one of the polls with the first cohort. We can see poor data at the top, followed by poor systems, as in software, undocumented procedures. The second cohort had a slightly different view of things, being a different set of local governments. And we can see here that whereas cohort 1 said poor data was at the top of their list, for cohort 2 it was slightly further down the list. So from a program level, what Asset Management BC is trying to do is trying to find patterns in the data across the 2 cohorts and see how we can use this to share more largely with the community of practice at large. And ultimately looking at, how do culture, capacity, collaboration, and council or board fit into this insight that we are gleaning through the cohorts. Let's move now briefly onto the delivery of the program. When we first made a call for interest back in late 2019, there were 32 organizations that responded: regional districts, First Nations, municipalities. The 2 cohorts were selected over the 2020 and 2021 years. Here is our first cohort of 7 local governments, the second cohort of 7 local governments. Currently, the calls for interest is out, looking for applicants. The call for interest has been extended until the end of March, and Asset Management BC is looking forward to expanding the program and to gathering further insight from a third and perhaps fourth or additional cohorts over time. The cohorts have been meeting in a virtual setting as a result of this constraints imposed on us by COVID, and will continue to likely meet in a virtual setting. And it's really about, how do we get to the center of that maze, value and sustainable service delivery? How do we unpack and break through the complexity of all the many things involved in asset management? So one of the first steps that the cohort is asked to do is to identify within this universe of asset management challenges, pick one thing to bring into the program. Identify one challenge you have, and we frame it as an artifact. Tell us about one thing that you are struggling with. Now, an artifact can be either something we have that is not working properly. Perhaps we have an asset management plan sitting on the shelf gathering dust. Or an artifact could be something we do not have that we know we need to have. Okay, perhaps a level of service framework, we've been struggling to develop that. So we asked the cohort members to identify an artifact, bring it into the program, because they will be applying the principles of the program to this one artifact and writing a business case around this one artifact. So basically applying theory and principles into practice. Here's an example of some of the artifacts that were selected by the first 2 cohorts, things ranging from asset hierarchies, level of service frameworks, asset management plans, change management plans, condition frameworks, process maps, maintenance plans. So we have already applied the 4 C's framework and the program architecture to a variety of artifacts. Now, each of these artifacts, we recognize that each organization, each local government is somewhere on a journey of continuous improvement, and these artifacts are somewhere in that journey. And we apply a series of 4 exercises to these artifacts. Okay, and we want to understand what is the risk. The first exercise is around what is the risk of failing to operationalize the artifact. Is it a high risk, medium risk, low risk? Recognizing that as an organization, we have service delivery goals, we have staff who are trying to push and pull these initiatives through the organization. It requires budgeting, it requires executive sponsorship, and our local government has many of these artifacts that we are trying to push and pull through. So the one artifact brought into the program, it's recognized that it is only one of a suite of artifacts that every local government is challenged with in its asset management program. So let's take a quick look at the 4 exercises very briefly to show the participants today what the program is about. Firstly, we recognize that barriers on our journey to sustainable service delivery come in many shapes and sizes. Okay, things like staff capacity, organizational resistance to change, perhaps organizational structure, poor data, etc. And we want to apply the program to get us on there, improve our alignment with that journey to sustainable service delivery. And we want to bridge our current state into our future state. And the program is about providing us a good transition state. The first exercise, we're looking at the results from the first 2 cohorts, blue cohort 1, orangey color cohort 2, indicating the artifact that they brought into the program. How did they self-assess the risk of failing to operationalize their own artifact? So this is what exercise 1 is about, identifying how complex is our artifact that we've brought into the program, because that's going to set the baseline for the business case that is the culmination of the program. So we can see here 3 artifacts were deemed by the participants to be high risk of them failing to operationalize their own artifact. Here's the batch that were deemed to be relatively low risk and medium risk. So you can see we had a wonderful cross-section of artifacts that were brought through the program and were applied to the principles in the program. Here is a simple heat map indicating for the 14 local governments how they scored themselves across 18 criteria as the part of the first exercise. Things like, what's the scope of this change? what percentage of employees will be impacted? Is there a degree of process change? What's the time frame for the change? So this provided the cohort with a structured way from the discipline of change management to find a way to get on the journey of operationalizing asset management. This program actually sits at the intersection between change management and asset management, and we bring the principles of change management to this program. Exercise 2 is a pestle SWOT analysis. What we're trying to do here is identify how many factors are coming to bear on our artifact. From that universe of all those things out there, council commitment, budget adequacy, data quality, earthquake preparedness, sustainability, service level agreements, software, climate change, union strikes, inflation rates, how does this universe of many things come to bear on our artifact? And how can we use a structured approach, a pestle SWOT, to develop a roadmap and a business case? Here we can see the results from the first two cohorts, very briefly, of the SWOT distribution and the pestle distribution. Simply a way to bring some structure to the context. Now, we will share with you in a moment some of the feedback from the cohort having gone through the exercises. Positive, mostly positive, and a few comments indicating some rooms for improvement, and we have been listening to the cohort, learning as well, and improving the program as it evolves. Exercise 3 is a pairwise analysis, recognizing that we need to make trade-offs. On that journey to sustainable service delivery, we will inevitably be making trade-offs. How do we optimize those trade-offs and justify them back against our organization's objectives? So we do a pairwise, looking at that universe of the many criteria out there, ranging from reduced cost, enhanced performance, managed risk, and compare these in pairs. And we're using an Excel-based tool. The cohorts provided with a mechanism to weight these different criteria. So that is part of what exercise 3 is about. Exercise 4, we move into that business case. And we're trying to provide a mechanism to develop a business case where we evaluate 3 different approaches to operationalizing the artifact that's been brought into the program, and evaluate each of those 3 approaches in a business casing tool. Ultimately, to find the right path to sustainable service delivery, recognizing that the path is different for each local government, recognizing that each local government sits in a slightly different context, has a different structure, and has a different culture. And the business case lays out, or helps the organization lay out, a path to that sustainable service delivery. Throughout the program, the asset management wheel is applied as well, together in tandem with the 4 C's approach to help guide the organization to find how are we going to develop our change journey. Here we see an example of understanding the investment period that has to be made through either things like training, additional resourcing of some kind, so that we can eventually move through a payback period and into a value add period as a result of operationalizing our artifact. Program results. Well, ultimately, we're trying to transform the local government through the program. Various ways we think about transformation. Some organizations might be a little short-sighted, want to think more longer term. It might be transformation moving from a reactive to a proactive environment. We may have some misalignments within the organization that need to be addressed through the artifact, breaking down functional silos, moving towards cross-functional teamwork. Perhaps there are some inefficiencies, and we want to find ways to be more efficient. Feedback from the participants. Feedback regarding the first exercise. We polled throughout the program. We've been capturing the feedback. Pleased to report mostly positive, and learning from any negative feedback. And here we can see some of the comments back from the participants. It created a good, healthy conversation between operations and finance. Looking forward to the pairwise comparison workshop. Thought-provoking. So here's some of the feedback from exercise 1. Exercise 2, great for brainstorming and mapping the organization. Helpful, stimulated discussion. Quite informative, valuable information for our journey. So we are pleased to see that the cohort has received value from the program, and overwhelmingly positive feedback. Here is some feedback in the cohort's own words, their feedback on the business casing tool. Create a good discussion, positive learning, engaging, quite involved, good tool, complicated but good, a lot to take in. So folks, I've moved very quickly. I see we're 3 minutes to the top of the hour. Just want to recap and close with, again, a thank you to Asset Management BC for the opportunity to provide a very quick summary of the program today. And just to reiterate that the call for submissions has now been moved to March the 31st. It was March the 18th. And with that, I will hand it back to you, Gabby, or to you, David Allen. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, David. Well, that was, did you get a chance to even catch a breath? You know, that was outstanding, very efficient. One thing I did realize, and it's excellent to wrap this workshop up with, you know, potential for training in the future. And I hope people will take advantage of that. On the AMBC website, you can register to get all the information necessary for these workshops that are going to be forthcoming in the next few couple of months, I would say, if I'm not mistaken. So that's great. Really jump into it.